We're doing a lot of innovation at Trusted. I think one of the things that fascinates me about this whole market is that the tech is changing, the regulatory environment is changing. A lot of things, still haven't been decided, especially when it comes to standards, proving who you're dealing with, authenticate them, and then secondarily, are they authorized to undertake that transaction, whatever that transaction is, within the business? And the technologies that we use to do that are evolving all the time. We're acutely aware of what's going on in the market. I guess I see it as our role to assimilate all of that, decide what's relevant, what's not relevant, and what adds value, to be frank.
Welcome to the Peak IDV Executive Series video podcast, where I speak with executives, leaders, founders, and change makers in the digital identity space. I'm your host, Steve Craig, founder and chief enablement officer of Peak IDV. For our audience, this is a video first series, so if you're enjoying the audio version, please check out the video recording on executiveseries.peakidv.com, where you can watch the full episode, read the transcript, and access any of the resources or links discussed in today's conversation. I'm thrilled to speak with this week's guest. He is Lyall Cresswell, founder of Trusted. Trusted is the first ID and credentials verification app designed specifically for the transport and logistics industry. Trusted provides operators with the ability to generate, request, and share verified business credentials in real time, removing hours of repetitive admin and manual process. Lyall is a serial entrepreneur. In addition to Trusted, he founded Transport Exchange Group in the year 2000 and leads it today as its chief executive. Transport Exchange Group, or TEG, is an advanced freight exchange platform used by over 8,500 transport and logistics businesses in the UK, continental Europe, and North America. Welcome, Lyall. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here.
Let's get started. Can you share more about Trusted? What's your typical elevator pitch for the company?
Yeah, great. So thanks for having me on the podcast, Steve. It's been pretty much about a year since we first met out in San Francisco. So Trusted really is setting out to verify the entire supply chain. We're bringing the concept of digital identity and verifiable credentials to transport, to freight, and really looking to set out to verify the credentials and also the capabilities of every actor throughout the supply chain.
Well, the Trusted story really begins with Transport Exchange Group. So I'd love to double click on the history there, how you got started with TEG going back to the year 2000.
Yeah, wow. Okay. So that's a few years ago. So let's rewind about 24, nearly 25 years ago now. I started Transport Exchange Group just after the dot-com boom / crash. For those of your viewers that remember that, it was a pretty painful time. But we were started with a completely kind of green slate. For those of you that cast your mind back to that time, there were a lot of marketplaces, and especially B2B marketplaces. And they all set out with the objective and intention to revolutionize the industries that they served. We set out with a very simple yet powerful proposition, which was to make better utilization of assets within the transport industry. So we were servicing couriers, haulage and trucking companies, third-party logistics businesses, freight forwarders, anybody essentially who was servicing and participating in the transport and freight industry.
And how has TEG evolved from that time when you got started to the past few years?
It's a lot of years to kind of encapsulate in a few words, but we pretty much stayed very true to our original intention. So we're still servicing exactly the same industry. We have a lot of businesses who are still with us, over the past 20 plus years. And I guess that the evolution of the business really is encapsulated by technology that has come along, especially in the past 4 to 5 years, and I'll come to that in a bit, that has enabled us to realize some of the products and some of the solutions that we're now delivering. We pretty much invented, I think it's fair to say, digital freight matching back 20 odd years ago. And We've evolved the order execution part within Transport Exchange Group, within the platform, such that now we're handling millions of transactions every year from start to finish. So typically, the businesses on the platform will post freight, will match that. They will then make a selection of the carrier or the driver that they want to work with, and then the order will actually get executed in the platform right the way through proof of delivery, creating an electronic bill, electronic invoice in the platform, an electronic POD, and the piece which I alluded to just a couple of minutes ago is that we're now entering the world of pay and finance. So the missing piece, if you like, Steve, which I wanted to do for 20 plus years, but the technology, frankly, didn't exist at that time, is to bring pay and settlement and finance into the platform, so that we can see really the order right the way through from inception to end piece, including settlement.
It's interesting. Can you go deeper into the role TEG plays in that money exchange?
Yeah. So what's really important, I spend half my time explaining this to people that kind of aren't necessarily close to the industry or have a different view of B2B marketplaces and online marketplaces, is we don't come between the buyer and the seller. I think that's really important, and that differentiates us from a lot of other platforms. We are not, to put it into kind of technical speak, we're not the merchant of record. The contracts that are agreed on our platform are between the two participating businesses. We're there to provide the platform for all of this to take place. We set the governance and the policy, and indeed we mediate sometimes, but we don't come between the two parties, and that's a key differentiator, and it allows us to stay neutral and independent and run a fair marketplace. So when it comes to the role of the money exchange, that really follows the same principles. So we're there to facilitate, we're there to make sure that when a buyer comes to approve and then pay a seller's invoices on the platform, again, all of that happens in a neutral, totally independent venue, and we provide all of the data, we provide all of the conditions and the solutions for that to take place as accurately and also with the least amount of friction possible.
For the payment solution, is this specifically within the UK or continental Europe, North America? Where does it operate?
As of today, it's a UK specific solution, but the intention is that we will actually then roll that out, because I fundamentally believe there's a gap in the marketplace, which is and we'll come on to this when we talk about the role that Trusted plays, of course, but to enable these payments to take place at any scale, whether you're paying just a few invoices a month or whether you're paying several thousand invoices a month, we believe that we can deliver a lot of efficiency in that process.
Excellent. Well, perhaps we segue into Trusted. What's the relationship, if any, between TEG and Trusted beyond you being the founder of both?
I must be crazy. I mean, I'm kind of on my third startup. I started my first business when I was 24 or something like that, and a bit older now, clearly. So Trusted is a business which is informed and born out of Transport Exchange Group. We've got that deep domain expertise, understanding of the transport and logistics industry. And it's a completely separate business. We did that quite deliberately because we want to service the whole of the supply chain. The tech stack is different, different development team, different commercial team. The first client for Trusted has been Transport Exchange Group, and what we're doing there and what we're seeing is that we are upping the standard within the freight exchange, within Transport Exchange Group, and with very, very genuine desire to really increase the level of confidence in the marketplace and provide a holistic identity for all of those businesses which are participating, from very small businesses right the way through to larger businesses. That's what businesses want. They want to be confident with whom they're transacting. They can't take the time necessarily to do what you and I would describe as KYC, know your client, KYB, know your business. A lot of these transactions are happening in not necessarily in real time, but in a very quick space of time, short space of time. But that's what Trusted is set out to do.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, TEG, longstanding mature business, you were trying to solve a problem within that group, and you didn't, or you couldn't find a solution, so you created Trusted as a new company. Is that a good summary of how that progression happened?
Yeah, it's and in fact, a lot of the design and a lot of the data points that we think are relevant have been born out of our 25 odd years of running Transport Exchange Group, and also observing, the things that were systemically wrong in the industry, whether it's to do with identity of the participants in the marketplace, whether it's to do with managing to keep on top of the documentation. Especially in our industry, it's quite highly regulated. The smallest business has a surprising number of artifacts, 3 or 4 different types of insurance, maybe an operator's license. In the US, obviously, you'd be regulated. If you're in the trucking space, you'd be regulated by the FMCSA. There's a surprising amount of regulation, even for very, very small businesses. And that understanding, that knowledge, as I said, is born out really of our operation of the Transport Exchange Group platform.
Well, can you take me to the moment you had the aha or the eureka moment for Trusted? What were some of the challenges that you were facing, and why did you decide, what, can't find what I need, I'm just going to build a second company to serve that need?
One of my aha moments, as you describe it, was actually seeing what was possible in terms of digital identity verification. I'd always wanted to digitalize the compliance piece. In fact, we had actually done that partially, especially within Transport Exchange Group. You can imagine, you can't manage that kind of scale without digitalizing some part of the process. But the aha moment, as I say, really came about when I saw for the first time. I'm going back now about probably 5-6 years ago, when I saw digital identity for the first time, opening a bank account with my son, strangely enough. So pretty much like every bank account anywhere, whether it's in the UK, the US, pretty much the same. How did you open a bank account, Steve? How did you open your first bank account? You walked into a branch, I'm assuming.
Many years ago. Yep, it was a branch.
Many years ago. Okay. So when I was standing, my son was about to go to university for the first time. And I said, he said to me, Dad, I need a bank account. Okay, fine. Well, my father took me into a branch of a major bank many years ago, and you sat down, you made an appointment and sat with the bank manager, and they had a nice chat and maybe even gave you a cup of tea. Right. So here in the UK, there are fewer and fewer branches, and the banks, not just the neo banks, but the legacy banks, largely now onboard the majority of their new business remotely. So I saw that. I saw identity service verification for the first time. I can't remember now whether it was a selfie or a video or whatever it was. But that was when I first realized, we can actually understand much more about the key individuals who are directing and owning and running the businesses that we're serving. And that was my aha moment, if you like.
Excellent. I'm always fascinated by founder origin stories, and that one where you're being influenced by a consumer experience, which probably during that time, there was a lot of innovation going on to reduce the burden of going into a branch, and probably to save money on all of the cups of tea that they're not providing to consumers when they can just push them through a mobile or digital channel. So that's great that you saw the consumer side, and then you thought, wow, I could apply this to an entirely other business. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the Trusted team today. So you're founder, What do you have an executive level role? What are some of the other team members that are in the company?
Sure. So we've got a completely separate technology team, completely separate technology stack. We've done a very, very close integration with Transport Exchange Group. Obviously, it's been done quite deliberately because Trusted now has other standalone customers, and in transport and logistics, that's our core competency, if you like. It can serve other areas, but it's a completely separate team, completely, as I say, standalone tech team as well.
And those are based in the UK or global workforce?
Yeah. I mean, it's typical kind of SaaS business. So yeah, we have a lot of competency in the UK, and other regions as well. I mean, with the talent that we require, it's a very blended type of approach that we require. So as well as all the standard platform type of skills that we need, we also need expertise in digital identity as well.
That's great. How would you describe the core pillars of Trusted as a solution? Can you talk through the highlights of the technical stack?
We take data sources from wherever is most appropriate and best fit. We're bringing our job, as I see it, is to orchestrate all of these different technologies, but especially all of these different data sources. Some we have done which are quite unique to us, I have to say, in terms of tech stack. I mean, it's all cloud based. It's typical, AWS infrastructure, Kubernetes, and then of course we're using what we're seeing in the marketplace to be the best of breed when it comes to identity service providers. There's a lot going on in that area now. Everything's built as microservices and Lambda functions, Java, and a front end which is in Angular. We're just about to launch for the first time a mobile app, and that will be headless as well, so that it can actually be made available within third-party apps. But as I say, we're very much the part of the tech is proprietary to us, but also our job is to find the best data sources in any given region, basically.
Great. So there's a component of aggregation and perhaps orchestration in play for Trusted?
Part of our role, and also a challenge to Trusted, is to make sure that we keep abreast of what those best of breed are. Because you're obviously an expert in identity service, so that's rapidly changing all the time. And it's a bit like a kind of arms race, isn't it?
Yeah, the industry has evolved from a lot of on-premises sort of core system deployments where large banks would only take software that can go into their data center to now managed services, cloud service APIs, SDKs, and it continues to evolve. I'm seeing more and more orchestration layers. What I found really fascinating about my deep dive into Trusted and preparing for this conversation was that you have this unique vertical focus on the transportation ecosystem. And I think companies that are looking at verticals and looking at specific use cases can better adapt their solutions to their customer needs. I'm not too familiar myself with transportation and the ecosystem. Can you walk me through the players or the actors, so to speak, like the drivers and carriers and shippers? I saw 3PL, which I don't even know what that is. Maybe you could start there, what 3PL is and how all those pieces work together.
Yeah, okay. So looking from the outside, it's darn complicated.
Yeah, I'm intimidated. I like 3PL. It reminds me of Star Wars, C-3PO.
Right.
No, don't mean to joke, but yeah, maybe tell me more about what those pieces are and who are the components.
I'd start off by saying that each region has some of the similar terminology, but different meaning to it. So I probably the best way to say it is there are businesses which are asset owning. Yeah. So effectively they run sheds, warehouses, and they run transport. And then there are asset light businesses, just like in other industries. 3PL is a phrase which means actually slightly different things between the North American market and the UK market. But typically a 3PL is managing freight. You can actually step it up to a 4PL and even a 5PL, but we won't go there on this interview. So here in Europe, typically a 3PL, which means a third-party logistics business, may run some of their own assets, but they will also outsource some of their requirements or some of their customer requirements. In the US, a 3PL typically means or is deemed to refer to a brokerage. So they are managing freight. They don't have any of their own assets. They're acting as an intermediary between the shipper who owns the freight and the carrier who actually delivers the freight. What's interesting about trusted, and again, you mentioned the fact that we're dealing with a vertical, and it's a huge vertical, and we could talk all night about that. What we're focused on is actually delivering value and pragmatic solutions to every actor in that whole ecosystem, because it's a very interconnected ecosystem. I think that's the main thing to recognize about supply chain, and especially the transportation part of supply chain. There's a lot of connectivity. Businesses work with one another. There's a lot of, I hate the phrase, but I'd use it again. There's a lot of co-opetition where businesses compete, but they also cooperate. And what Trusted is doing, it's focused on bringing verification of identity, and then also the ability to create some kind of standardization between the 3PLs, who I've just kind of defined, the shipper, who's the end client, the carriers, and the drivers. So we're going right the way down to actually being able to verify and understand, but in a privacy enhancing way. And I will always stress that part. But effectively, Steve, we want you to be assured that the driver, maybe who's delivering your freight or your package to your door, whether it's your residential address or your business address, actually is verified, is qualified, carries the right certification. Maybe they're carrying some kind of specialist freight. We're attempting to, and that's our focus, is to really bring some verification standards and transparency to the whole of that supply chain.
Across those various actors in the supply chain, who is buying Trusted? Like, who has the vested interest in building that trust?
Typically, it will be the arranger of the freight, the third-party logistics business, the carrier, but also the shipper as well. Sometimes, depending upon their relationship with the supply chain, will also have an interest in that, especially if the commodity that they're dealing with is high value or theft attractive. It's important that they know who's carrying their freight, and that's one of the key questions that Trusted answers: is who's carrying my freight, and are they qualified to do that? We also see a lot of value, in fact, and being able to deliver efficiency to the drivers and to the carriers, because they're always getting asked, to present their insurance, to present their documentation, to re-verify themselves in some way with their customer, who could be a trucking company or a haulage company, could be a third-party logistics operator. So there's something in this for everybody.
You touched on the concept of KYC, or Know Your Customer, which is a term used in regulated financial services. I think the audience of this podcast is really familiar with that, as well as person identification. But we're seeing more and more around businesses. How do you verify a business entity? And then the process to be able to verify a business is very different than an individual. How does this intersect between the personal identity, perhaps, of the driver, all the way through to the business entity of the trucking company? Or
That's a great question. So first of all, when I look at what identity service providers do with an individual, I know that it's pretty complicated, but it's not nearly as complicated as verifying a business, as we found. I mean, it's very difficult, and especially when you then bring in all of the other artifacts which a business is expected to have in a specific domain, like supply chain and transport. So what we do is we set out to verify and understand who the key people are, or either people or a person or people. It depends on the number of individuals involved with the business in terms of ownership and company directors. In the US, obviously the president and any other kind of authorized individual. And then we're marrying that together with the business identity. So in our specific industry, or in road transport, there are certain identifiers, operators licenses here in the UK. In the US, you've got motor carrier licenses, you've got Department of Transport qualification and a license as well, plus a whole lot of other data that are brought in to prove that business identity. And then what we do is we're saying, bringing in all of this data, bringing in all of the verification that we can do, to essentially we're trying to end up to say at the endpoint, as I say, not just at onboarding, but throughout the lifetime of that business, is to ensure that we know who we're dealing with. So that's the intersection of the natural person, as we call it in the industry, with the business, or in fact plural businesses, because many people have involvement with several businesses. So we want to make that as efficient as possible as well.
Having conducted the business analysis or the know your business steps, what are other parts of the transaction then that Trusted could be used beyond sort of that just initial onboarding?
I described how, especially in Transport Exchange Group, we handle the whole of the order execution, right the way through presenting the order, acceptance of the order. I mean, you want to make sure that the entity that's accepting your order is, the business that you think you're transacting with, through to the collection of the freight. So we've got a solution which we're just rolling out now into beta here in the UK, but then that'll come into the US as well, where we can actually prove and give evidence and auditability to who actually collected my freight, right the way through to transaction, through to the delivery, through to the presentation of the electronic bill, and most importantly, actually, through to who am I paying? Because there's a lot of fraud, as you know, around payment. We don't need to necessarily spell it all out, but Trusted is part of the solution to ensure that I'm paying the right business.
What are maybe just like one example of a payments fraud scenario for this industry? What have you seen out in the market?
It's no different in transport and supply chain than it is in any other sector. But one of the things that you're probably familiar with is push payment fraud, where a fraudster will change the bank account. They will send a genuine looking email to accounts payable saying, hey, we changed our bank account, please pay this account, for our invoices going forwards. An unaware, unsuspecting accounts clerk will change that banking information and pay the wrong party. That's very typical. It's only one of the areas, but that's something that Trusted protects and secures that.
One of the other big challenges that I've heard from the market, and I've talked with a few founders in the business verification space, is the business information, licenses, and insurance, and bank account details, that changes, it degrades. What are you doing to keep pace with kind of change of the business over time?
So that's a fascinating topic for me. So typically, as you know, a bank will do a KYC refresh, maybe, I don't know, what do you find, every 2 to 3 years?
It's often not, probably about maybe a year to 5 years, depending on the bank. It's not too often.
So what Trusted is attempting to do, bearing in mind that we have transactional authentication going on a daily basis in Trusted, we're actually, first of all, we're as we talked about a little bit earlier, we're taking all of these different data signals and data sources to make sure that Trusted is as up to date as possible. There's also, and an incentive, I should say, on the Trusted entity to keep that profile as up to date as possible. But when it comes to basically what you and I would probably call in the identity space persistent KYC, that's very much something that we're focused on. And because of the transactional nature of the industry that we're serving, we think we've got a fairly good solution there to make sure that John Doe's profile of him and his business is as up to date as possible. There are other integrations which we're just implementing at the moment, for example, on the insurance side, which will ensure that those documents are in place still. Maybe they were they might have been in place 3 months ago when you onboarded that supplier, but they're still current today. So that's something that we're very focused on.
Is there a proactive alerting mechanism to let the business know when the data is no longer correct, or maybe the
For sure, for sure. I mean, you'll get alerts every time that a document or an artifact or a data point in your profile is that has an expiry date is about to become out of date, and therefore you can go and rectify that. Yeah, for sure. That's a big part of the industry. But as I say, the industry is very, very transactional. So it's almost like a bank in the terms that the entities that are enrolled to Trusted are actually transacting with other businesses every single day.
I'm curious, Lyle, about the implementation process. Let's say I'm one of these actors in the ecosystem and I've decided to move forward with your solution. What are the first steps that they're taking to deploy and to leverage Trusted?
So taking the Transport Exchange Group example, but now we've got other customers who are now onboarding their own suppliers to Trusted as well. They'll be enrolled, they'll receive an invitation to Trusted, and depending upon what level of verification that business, we call them a tenant who wants to employ their suppliers or enroll their suppliers, should I say, into Trusted, decides on. We've tried, and it's a continual part of our product iteration, is to make that as frictionless as possible. There's various different things that we have in our roadmap to make sure that, the system, you don't have to upload documents, for example, because they will be there, or we'll take those through an API. But typically they'll go through that, and then the compliance officer within that tenant organization will go through the process of verifying, and not the identity so much, because that can be done in an autonomous way, but they'll go through the process of ensuring that that new supplier meets the standards which they have set in Trusted, and then they become compliant.
When I introduced Trusted earlier in the podcast, there was a line that I got from your website about reduction in admin or manual processes. It'd be interesting to hear about before and after scenarios where prior to Trusted, there was perhaps X, and then the deployment yielded Y. What are the benefits that companies have seen, or the return on their investment in using the service?
Their compliance standards should certainly be raised. A lot of businesses are doing this either in a manual or a semi-manual way at this moment. We're trying to move towards certainly semi-autonomous, but even kind of like full automation of this process. And a lot can happen, as you know, from especially in the identity piece. It can happen automatically. On the supplier side, this is so the business that actually has created a profile. It's pretty much as I just mentioned before. We built it in such a way that they can actually share. They can take that profile, and then they can share it with other customers, with other businesses that they're trading with. It's portable. Part of our concept is it should actually be a lifetime profile. There's a lot of emerging technologies which are still, I think, frankly, in discovery. Not just discovery for ourselves, but also in discovery for the industry as a whole. There are standards which are still being worked on, but we see this whole concept of a lifetime identity, which is reusable, can be shared with other businesses. That whole concept, as you know, you're probably familiar with, of Web3C, which is being able to share elements of your not just of your personal identity, because we're dealing with business identity. But selective disclosure, I guess, is the way that you would describe it. And that means that we can deliver value to everybody in this ecosystem, not just the buyer.
When it comes to value creation, I'm always interested to understand a company's business model to capture that value and to ensure that companies have really good return on their investment using your service. How does Trusted make money? Like, how does your system operate from a financial standpoint?
We're a typical SaaS model. It's pretty straightforward, and that will develop over time. The vision for Trusted is, frankly, I mean, we we think that we have, or we believe, hopefully, that we have fairly extensive and proven knowledge and deep understanding of our domain, certainly in transport and logistics, and also in the wider supply chain industry. And I think if we follow the fundamentals, and also we're a very ethical business. You've heard me mention on this on the interview now. You've heard me talk about privacy enhancing, 2 or 3 times. That's an essential component of what Trusted delivers, and we will, keep abreast of the new technologies, especially decentralized identity is something that we're keeping a very close eye on as time goes forwards.
A lot of the solution providers in the space, they leverage a similar SaaS model, but it varies depending on what they're doing. So some cases it's a transactional event where you've onboarded this customer or business, and then there's a transactional charge. Others, as they get connected to authentication, they look at the identities under management, or they look at some sort of per seat fee or per organization fee. Where does Trusted fall across that spectrum?
Yeah, sorry. When I say SaaS, I mean I don't really differentiate between all of those models, because whether it's any of those, you've mentioned 3 or 4 different kind of commercial models there, and they're all appropriate to Trusted. We're just about to launch, I think I mentioned earlier in our call, a solution that we've built here called Secure Collect, and that proves to everybody's satisfaction that the driver who's turning up at your dock, your loading dock, or your premises, your depot, to come and collect that freight is authorized to undertake that transaction. And if they're not, we'll let any stakeholder, whether it's the shipper or the broker, or anybody else that's connected to that shipment, we'll let them know about that in real time, because a lot of fraud, by the way, happens at the point of origination in freight, probably about 95%. So I mean, all those different commercial models I consider to be kind of a SaaS-based solution, not just a subscription, but certainly we think that we can add value on a per transaction basis as well.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up on time. I have just a few questions remaining. You mentioned some of the investments you're making in terms of product functionality. Is there anything you can share roadmap-wise for 2024? You just mentioned Secure Collect. I think you talked about more self-service. Anything that you could publicly put out there?
We're doing a lot of innovation at Trusted. I think one of the things that fascinates me about this whole market is that the tech is changing, the regulatory environment is changing. A lot of things, still haven't been decided, especially when it comes to standards. We're acutely aware of what's going on in the market, and I guess I see it as our role, really, is to assimilate all of that, decide what's relevant, what's not relevant, and what adds value, to be frank, and then bring that into Trusted to the benefit of all of our clients across the spectrum. I mean, proving who, and when I say who, I don't just mean at the individual level. I mean at the entity level, at the business level, at the organizational level, who you're dealing with, authenticate them, and then secondarily, are they authorized to undertake that transaction, whatever that transaction is, within the business? That's what we're focused on, and the technologies that we use to do that are evolving all the time.
Yeah, as you've been describing Trusted in this conversation, think about your business ID, your credential app itself fits into this broader category of portable identity, reusable identity, verifiable credentials. There are a lot of different companies emerging for different markets and for different problems they're solving. But understanding your solution, do you foresee going to other verticals or other industries outside of transport and logistics?
Yeah, we could do. That's certainly potential for the future. But you've got to remember that our industry that we serve is, first of all, we have we understand the industry that we serve. We've got 25 plus years and a lot of experience in that. So supply chain is huge. I don't think I ever particularly realized how huge supply chain was, but remember the supply chain isn't just about transport and logistics and depots and sheds and freight. It also touches on many other areas, including the financing of supply chain, which is an adjacent area. Supply chain as a whole, as we understand it and we get more and more traction in that area, becomes, I think, something that we become a specialist in. And I'm quite happy to own that. Whether we could deploy trusted to other areas, yeah, sure. I mean, the technology and the platform we built could certainly be deployed in those, but that remains.
What's your big picture vision, Lyall, for Trusted? Is it to be the dominant trusted platform in transport, or?
I'd love to be, and I see ourselves being a trust registry within transport and logistics and the wider supply chain. I certainly think the industry needs it. It needs somebody to come from a very certain perspective. It needs to be neutral. It needs to be independent. It needs to have an understanding of governance and how to write the correct policies, how to marry the tech and also the regulatory environment which exists, outside of supply chain, and bring that in to inform what we do and what we can do in our industry.
When I have looked at different solution providers in the market and consulted with some and worked at some in the past, there's this process of adding verticals or use cases, and some companies, they want to serve them all because identity and digital identity is such a universal problem to solve. But you really need deep subject matter expertise in the industry you're going to serve. You need to speak their language, understand the complexities. And so I find it fascinating that you're building for what is the backbone of commerce for the globe, which is how we get our goods, our physical goods. And we saw with the pandemic, when that all got shut down, how it affected us all. So I think that is a very worthwhile vision and mission. So thank you for sharing that. Well, we're just at time. I've got maybe three more questions for you, Lyall. If you've seen any of the episodes of Executive Series, I like to go just a little bit further than the LinkedIn profile, the person behind the press releases. When you're not crisscrossing the globe and building multiple companies, what are some of your hobbies or your important personal causes that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, sure. So at the back end of the pandemic, I started cycling, become quite a keen cyclist. I'm much to my wife's, I think I'm now on my third bike. So I've done quite a bit of riding, hoping to do a 5-day trip around France in the summer. That's become pretty cool. And actually, I know it sounds terrible, but this whole area, which obviously, Steve, is your domain about identity, is actually becomes very absorbing in itself as an intellectual exercise, and understanding all the potential and the possibilities. It's stretching. It really is. And myself and my colleagues, think about it pretty much all the time. So if I was to call that a hobby, I think that might also be true.
The digital identity space is the hobby. Hey, it's a passion project. It's
a serious undertaking. Let's not be too flippant about it. But it's interesting from both a business and also from an intellectual point of view.
Well, as we close out, Lyall, for those that are watching or listening to this, what type of conversations would you like to have with the market, and how should they reach out to you?
There's two aspects to that, really. So first of all, any providers to the market, whether they're interested in detecting fraud signals, we're always interested to talk to those guys. Same on the identity service provider angle. There's so much movement in that market, especially to try and push back and challenge generative AI in particular. So we're always interested to have those providers talk to us, and because as I say, our business is basically to bring the best solution to our customers and to our marketplace.
Excellent. Well, Lyall, we're at time. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I find your background really fascinating because you've been on the practitioner side with Transport Exchange Group, and then you created a company on the provider side. And so you're using that deep domain expertise to further the mission of the industry. So thank you for sharing that story and everything about Trusted.
And thanks, Steve. And yeah, we'll carry on talking. And I look forward to seeing whether you're in the UK or in London or in the US.
Absolutely. Perhaps we'll see each other again at Marketplace Risk in San Francisco this spring.
Oh, that, by the way, let's give a plug to Marketplace Risk. I mean, that is a fabulous conference. Anybody that's watching this video, if you haven't been to Marketplace Risk and you're involved in marketplaces or trust and safety in some way, that is a must attend event. So they do an event in San Francisco, and then they have an edition in London, which is kind of in the fall. And the people and the attendees at that are excellent. So yeah, if you're involved in trust and safety, that is a must. And Jeremy Gottschalk, who founded that along with some other folk, they've done a great job of bringing that community together.
100% agree. Well, thanks again, Lyall. We're going to wrap up here and enjoy the rest of your day and your evening.
Cheers. Thanks, Steve.